The United States Southern Command is releasing video showing a strike on an alleged drug boat in the Eastern Pacific, killing 3 people last night. The vessel was described as being operated by designated terrorist organizations. The 3 suspected narco-terrorists who were on board were all killed. No U.S. military forces were harmed, according to Southcom. So on Wednesday, NBC News reported that Southcom struck 2 other alleged drug boats in the Eastern Pacific.
The drugs coming in by sea are down 94%.
It was reported yesterday that the Trump administration targeted yet another alleged drug boat in the Pacific, killing 3 men in the 4th attack this week, putting the death toll at 205. U.S. Southern Command announced at the strike with its usual language that the vessel was, quote, engaged in narco-trafficking operations and operated by a designated terrorist organization, before then providing no further evidence for the allegation. It's the latest in a months-long campaign against these alleged drug boats traversing the Caribbean Sea and Eastern Pacific. And where we pick up this video is with the latter part of the government's oversight, right? That any news source with a platform should call into question is this administration's so-called war on drug boats has reached a very uncomfortable point, because the administration is still blowing up boats, killing people, calling them narco-terrorists, and releasing dramatic videos claiming they are making America safer, but they're providing no evidence that you would at least expect for such fatal encounters.
And so the consequences that you're talking about are incredibly dire. But I also just want to step back for a second and look at the justifications that they're even using. They're saying that these are narco-terrorists, et cetera. And that's the Republican line. But then Trump comes out and goes, it's for the oil. I mean, when we did our illegal invasion of Iraq and killed hundreds of thousands of people there, at least the Bush administration had the humility to pretend and go to the United Nations and say, oh, we're going to do this through the regular channels. I mean, this brazen, bully, illegal administration doesn't even go through that pretense. And I think that should scare everybody, because their foreign policy is might makes right, and that's all that matters.
So I'm not scared. I don't think any American is scared about the consequences of this.
I care about the world, not just Americans.
No, I know, but you're also, in this instance, caring about a narco-terrorist group and government
no evidence
that supports
provided.
them. There's been no evidence showing that they're not actually drug boats that are being sent
here. That's not how this works.
Especially as new reporting from the New York Times has claimed that this strategy has actually failed to slow the flow of cocaine into the United States. According to the New York Times and the Associated Press, this latest attack was the 4th strike in a single week, and the total death toll from the campaign has now reached 205. And the military are saying that these vessels are operated by narco-trafficking groups, right? But in this latest case, they never follow up with specific evidence showing who was on board, what exactly was being carried out, and why lethal force was necessary instead of, interdiction. Something that numerous lawmakers on both sides of the political aisle have called into question. And with the New York Times' latest reporting, it makes this even more damning in a way, because after months of these strikes, experts have said that the actual drug market has barely moved in the U.S.
The Armed Services Committee have indicated their displeasure of the type of information that's being provided to the Armed Services Committee. And if you look in the National Defense Authorization Act, what's about ready to be passed, there are provisions that are heightening the requirements on the Pentagon for the level of information that's going to be required by law as a result of the failure to provide information. And in this instance, of course, what's also so concerning here is, as you know, and as you guys have reported, this activity that's happening in the Caribbean where they're hitting these boats, these individuals, if they were captured and tried and convicted, they would be guilty, if they were found guilty, of criminal activity for which they're not subject to capital punishment. They would be put in jail. They wouldn't be subject to capital punishment. These people are being killed, not held and put in prison. So the concern of whether or not the intelligence is accurate, whether we actually know what's happening, who these people are, is very, very concerning when you have the highest bar of that capital punishment is being executed here.
In this sense, it looks to me like they're trying to pin the blame on somebody else and not them. There's a very distinct statement was said on Sunday Secretary Hegseth said he had no knowledge of this and it did not happen. It was fake news. It didn't happen. And then the next day from the podium of the White House they're saying it did happen. So either he was lying to us on Sunday or he's incompetent and didn't know it had happened. Do we think there's any chance that on Sunday the Secretary of the Defense did not know there had been a second strike?
Border cocaine seizures have not collapsed in a way that would suggest that supply has been seriously disrupted. And the scale of this campaign is not small either, right? The New York Times described this as roughly a $4.7 billion operation, one of the largest U.S. military deployments in Latin America in decades. Dozens of these boats have been hit, as we've reported on here, with more than 200 killed without any sort of due process, right? Which is why critics across the political spectrum have called these strikes extrajudicial killings.
Start with you, Senator Paul. What do you need to hear in a briefing? What questions do you have?
You know, it's not so much about a briefing, but we haven't had a briefing. To be clear, we've got no information. I've been invited to no briefing. But a briefing is not enough to overcome the Constitution. The Constitution says that when you go to war, Congress has to vote on it. And during a war, then, there's a lower rules for engagement. And people do sometimes get killed without due process. But the drug war or the crime war has typically been something we do through law enforcement. And so far, they have alleged that these people are drug dealers. No one said their name. No one said what evidence. No one said whether they're armed. And we've had no evidence presented. So at this point, I would call them extrajudicial killings. And this is akin to what China does, to Iran does with drug dealers. They summarily execute people without presenting evidence to the public. So it's wrong.
And the thing is, of course, the MAGA contingent love to frame any such questions as anti-patriotic or defending criminals. But as this administration have proven time and time again, what they often tell the public and expect everyone to believe verbatim, with little to no evidence provided to back it up, is often contrary to what independent reporting has stated happened. For instance, the attack on a U.S. base in Iran, which Hegseth was grilled over.
Everything shook, and it's something like what you see in the movies. You know, everything, your ears are ringing. You know, there's dust and smoke everywhere.
This soldier was part of a crew of about 60 troops stationed at the military post in Kuwait hit by the strike. He says his unit's leadership ordered them there despite intelligence showing it was a potential drone target.
We moved closer to Iran, to a deeply unsafe area that was a known target.
So what was the reason that you were told for why you needed to be there?
I don't think there was a good reason ever articulated.
The attack killed 6 American soldiers and injured dozens more. Were these deaths preventable?
In my opinion, absolutely yes.
The next day, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth called the Iranian drone a squirter that got through the Army's air defenses.
It happened to hit a tactical operations center that was fortified, but these are powerful weapons.
What fortifications existed there?
I mean, I would put it in the none category from a drone defense capability.
None. There were no fortifications.
None.
But what we've been told by this administration is that they're criminals, but they're not bringing them before a judge or not presenting any sort of evidence in court, not allowing lawyers, witnesses, or any process. I mean, legal experts and human rights advocates have argued that the suspected drug smuggling is ordinarily a law enforcement matter, not a battlefield justification for summary execution. Now, the Trump administration's defense is that they are not ordinary smugglers. They call them narco-terrorists. But that should be met with the question, then where's the public evidence about the individuals killed, the cargo, the cartel affiliation, or the immediacy of the threat? Again, those questions become even more prominent when it appears that the strategy is ineffective on its own terms. But as we've just become somewhat immune to at this point, is that this is just normal operating procedure. What was covered extensively in its early stages as military leaders overseeing these maritime attacks resigned all of a sudden, and the coverage now is nowhere near at the level that this type of story deserves, really.
Well, you know, in combination with the whole Russian 28-point plan, in combination with the lethal strikes on drug boats carrying cocaine in the Caribbean, what the world is seeing is that the Trump administration is purely performative, right? It doesn't matter what really happens, so long as in the moment when you're very, very mad at Mark Kelly, you threaten to court-martial him. Now, you know, Mark Kelly will never be court-martialed because, as you point out, what he said was perfectly consistent with the Uniform Code of Military Justice and what every officer knows is true. And by the way, if you ever did have a court-martial and Mark Kelly's defense attorney said, now, is there any context at all in which one might be worried that Donald Trump might issue an illegal order? Well, let's run the tape. Donald Trump suggested that maybe the United States military could train in America's cities. You know, Donald Trump has undertaken attacks on cocaine boats in the Caribbean on the flimsiest of legal rationales. So, I mean, it's a little bit like the Comey case. It's a little bit like the Letitia James case. It's purely performative, and at the end of the day, it's going nowhere. But in the meantime, my colleagues are getting death threats and are very much at risk because of the rhetoric of this performative president.
And the thing is, I get it, right? There's a lot going on, a lot of distractions. But can oversight not be an afterthought? Can we normalize just asking questions again?
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.